Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a movie that was a request by patron and rotted soul Shifty, who wanted me to watch and review the 2018 movie Hellfest. Now before I get into this review, I do want to just point out that this coming Friday, April 1st at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be having a YouTube premiere of my 83-minute-long directorial and acting feature-length debut, Amityville Gas Chamber. So go ahead and check it out. It's already on the channel. You can click on it and set a reminder for yourself and join us as we watch the movie live for the first time on Friday. I absolutely guarantee that if nothing else, it will be a truly unique experience. All right, so 2018's Hellfest, directed by 𝗘𝗾𝗄𝗶 𝗟𝗏𝗀 and written by a whole slew of people. This movie kind of centers around a group of friends that are going to a big old horror festival and engaging in various mazes and haunted house attractions and so forth, each one more extreme than the next. Now this may sound a little bit like the houses October built, but in all honesty, it's a whole lot more like the 2018 entry of Bloodfest, a completely different, although very similarly named movie that happened to come out the exact same year. And it's different than the houses October built in a number of ways. First, like Bloodfest, it's not found footage. This is a fairly straightforward cinematic narrative. And also, it doesn't take place going from place to place to place on a grand road trip of trying to find haunts. Instead, it's kind of one big theme park that has different little sections attached to it for the various types of experiences you might want to have. And although there are just an insane amount of similarities to Bloodfest, I do think that these are two very different movies, each in their own right. The tone, the feel of it, the characters, in this one, it's just a little bit more grown up, a little bit less wacky, a little bit more visceral, and I did honestly enjoy it more. And the whole nature of the horror aspect of this movie comes into play with more of a slasher subgenre kind of feel when a masked killer kind of integrates himself into the crowd of performers and the other people working the haunts to, well, essentially do what he does. Now, there were definitely some points in this movie that I enjoyed, but also some that I didn't care for a whole lot. And it's made for kind of a frustrating, not watch and not review, but video to make, and I'll explain why. A lot of what I liked about this movie comes down to the setting, and from what I read on IMDb, a lot of the setting comes down to the fact that it was shot on location and took a lot of set and decorations and so forth from Six Flags Over Georgia Fright Fest. So the idea that this movie had a whole lot of polish in its set design and its haunts and mazes and so on, with the various areas and the costumes and all the accoutrement that kind of comes with those areas, the fact that it was so well done kind of just more speaks to Six Flags Over Georgia more than this movie, but it still made for a much better watch than a lot of its similarly themed brethren like the movie Clown. Likewise, when we do have a situation where there are slasher or killer or whatever components happening within the confines of a haunted house, I've said this before on multiple reviews such as Haunt and, honestly, Clown, that one of the key things is to kind of have a differentiation of areas thematically. It's important that not one place looks identical to the next, because we as the audience need to have a immediate split-second recognition of geographical information. We need to know where characters are in relation to each other, and if every single corridor looks like the next, they could be 5 feet from each other, they could be 500 feet from each other, and the tension kind of dissipates as a result of that lack of information. So when we have areas that are really well defined in haunts and in areas like the movie Haunt and so forth, it really adds to a lot of good, solid information that the audience is registering, even within their subconscious, that allows for that terror and that tension to be built and explored. And by having such a professional polish to this one, with such elaborate set design, it absolutely pulled that off. So high marks on that, but again, is that Hellfest? Or is that Six Flags Over Georgia? So here was the frustrating part for me, is I actually kind of wanted to go to the nth degree on this review in this video here, so I actually reached out to Six Flags corporate, and I tried to get some information from them, told them that I was making journalist piece and so forth, and I wanted to speak with whoever is involved with security, because I was honestly wondering about all the security gaps that were present in this movie that allowed the killer to do what he did. There were a lot of elements of this movie, and honestly, this is the portion of it that I didn't care for, of one character experiencing a whole lot that none of the others did, and then it led to the fracturing, the conflict. I don't know. That felt cheap. That felt easy. It felt, I don't know, a little bit more Saturday morning cartoonish.
Did he physically hurt you?
I mean, he grabbed at me. I'm not injured.
Unless there is an actionable charge, there's nothing I can do.
This guy has been stalking us since the second we got here.
Which guy?
The guy with the mask from the Night Bumps ride.
You just described 15 people that work in this park.
And it's honestly one of the least interesting types of conflicts that I see between characters. But even so, you know, it made for the narrative of the film. And I have to say that the overall tone and quality of the movie didn't really excuse those moments, but it did distract me well enough that they kind of just blinked by. It was kind of like I was a fish that was just, you know, seeing something shiny. Anytime I may have seen a hook, it's like, oh, but something shiny, because it was, you know, some great kills, some great set dressing. But when I reached out to Six Flags to try and get some information about their security protocols, I know that there's the rules in place. The guests aren't allowed to dress up in costume, only the performers on the streets and in the sets and so forth. And there's a good reason for that. A lot of that comes down to the elements of what happened in this movie, which begs the question, how do you prevent guests from bringing in their own costumes? Like, at what point does the simplicity of the mask and so forth actually get caught by security, and what happens if somebody is caught during there? What happens if somebody is in physical and alarming trouble within the actual haunt itself? Who's monitoring it? What kind of, you know, going from stage lights to actual emergency lights do they have? How do they know that somebody's even in trouble in the first place? All those questions I had, and unfortunately, I couldn't get anybody to get back to me beyond just taking my information. So it was a little bit frustrating on that note. So a lot of the elements that I had trouble with as far as the movie goes in terms of realism, in terms of how this park would actually respond to these incidences, to respond to this character claiming she's making these wild observations and so forth, I really couldn't get a straight answer from the nearest model that I could come up with, which was where they actually shot, to find out how valid that is. So I really had no basis of comparison between the fiction of the film and the actuality of reality. So that was honestly a little frustrating for me. I thought it was going to be some easy answers, just trying to get some basic information about what safety measures are in place, but apparently, well, that's too much. I don't know, maybe I should just operate on the assumption that these things actually could happen at Six Flags. I haven't heard from them otherwise. For legal reasons, I'm not claiming that these things actually could happen or that Six Flags safety measures are in any way inadequate. Look, this was not a great movie, but as a slasher film that had some really good set design, some good haunts, some good areas and so forth, and some characters that you really were kind of rooting to get killed in vicious ways, and for the most part, pretty well delivered on that front, I have to say that this was a pretty decent watch. Not every movie has to have the deep level of lore like 𝗘𝗾𝘂𝗶𝗽𝗺 the Curse, or the deep level of inter-character relationships with quiet commentary on family and difficulty in mental health, like the recent You Are Not My Mother. Sometimes we can just have a good old-fashioned slasher movie with some characters that we really just want to see die. And when we get a movie that does have a fair amount of fun with its setting and with its characters and with that brutality of its kills as a slasher film, I think it's worth making a note of, and for that reason, I do recommend the 2018 movie Hellfest. So thank you, Shifty, for recommending this one to me. I don't think it would have hit my eyeballs otherwise, especially after 2018's Bloodfest. But I am glad that I watched this one, and I'm also glad that you watched this video. I do hope you liked it. If you did, please click like and subscribe. And remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.